Hi everyone, welcome to Just Roots Kitchen Intuition Workshop. Today we are making a kimchi stew. It's a Korean dish and we'll get into what that is, what it tastes like in just a second. If you are just getting here, make sure to put your name in the chat. Nobody is here right now, so I think we're good. And just so folks know, we're going to go over all the materials that we'll need for this recipe, everything that came in a DIY kit, and if you don't have one, what you'd have to provide on your own, and then we'll get cooking. It's a relatively easy recipe, and it'll happen pretty quickly. So just to start, kimchi is a Korean dish. It's usually served as a side dish, and it's a fermented dish made predominantly from napa cabbage and daikon radish. So these two are the main ingredients, but you may also find any type of salted fish in there, like fish sauce or anchovy. Then you may have carrots, you may have other types of vegetables, root vegetables in there. And lots of pepper flake, like chili pepper flake usually. And we're using the kimchi, this fermented dish, to make a stew. And because kimchi is fermented, it gives a really beautiful vinegary, bold flavor. And so we'll combine that in our stew, and I think you will enjoy it. So let's take a quick peek at everything we're going to be using. Obviously, we're going to want a knife and a cutting board. And then in terms of materials, we're going to use a peeler for ginger. I can show you, we can use a peeler, and I can also show you, if you don't have one, how to just do it with a spoon. A measuring cup, I just got 1 cup size. I also got a liquid measuring cup because we're going to be pouring out either water or chicken broth. You can do this recipe with water and it still tastes good if you are not using chicken broth, or veggie broth would be great. Some measuring spoons. Here, I got out sort of my system of a colander. So we're going to be separating the kimchi from the juice that the brine that the kimchi is in. So this is going to keep the solids from the liquids, and we want to preserve the liquid. So that's why we're using a bowl. You could also use a colander on top of a bowl. That would be just fine. And then in terms of ingredients, so we have a couple of these pre-made kimchi bottles from Hawthorne Foods. So these are fermented foods. If you don't use all of them, they should stay in the fridge. We're going to be using about 2 cups of that plus the brine. Scallions. We got some extra firm tofu. So tofu is also a fermented product of soybeans. And so that'll be the protein in this dish. I also want to talk about what other proteins you could use recreating it. As mentioned, chicken broth or vegetable broth or even water could work. We're going to use 2 to 2.5 cups of that. Your kits came with this amazing local dumpling sauce. So it's like a sweet soy sauce. We really wanted to purchase this product, let people try it out because it's made locally, and we love that. We're going to just be using, a couple teaspoons of this throughout the whole dish. You could also use gluten-free tamari if you have a gluten allergy, or if you just prefer soy over this and you want to hang on to this for when you make dumplings. We'll also have some sesame oil in our kits. We're really using small amounts. It's a very powerful flavor, but it's important in this dish. And one very important thing in this dish is red chili flakes or chili peppers. Now, there is a traditional Korean chili pepper that you would use, but you don't have to. If you're making this dish at home, you can certainly use whatever pepper you have. So I'm going to use a little bit of the Calabrian pepper flakes, just red pepper. And you might also have some like Thai chili flakes at home. You could certainly use those too. We're going to use some long grain white rice. We'll get cooking that in a minute. Some garlic and some ginger, and really you'll have some leftover ginger here too. And last, but certainly not least, we did a napa cabbage. So some kits have daikon kimchi only, meaning it's kimchi made from daikon radish, and it's not highlighted with napa cabbage. So we wanted to include that in the recipe for folks. We could only source certain amounts locally of different types of kimchi. So you may just have the daikon variety. It's okay. We're going to keep the recipe the same either way. But you will have a napa cabbage in your box. Now, we're not going to use this whole thing. It's really big. We do have a suggestion though. If you end up liking this dish, making your own kimchi is actually really easy, really rewarding, and really good for you. So it's good for your gut microbiome. So we highly suggest checking out our YouTube channel where this video will be recorded. And you can go on there and watch a under 15-minute workshop of making kimchi from start to finish. And so I suggest using the other half or whatever parts of this napa cabbage you don't use for that. Okay, so those are all of our supplies and ingredients. And oh, two more things, sorry. One, we're gonna use a rice pot, just a small pot. I'm gonna do just a cup of rice. Just follow the recipe for that. If you're gonna use more rice to feed more people, then you're gonna want a bigger pot. And then I also wanted a heavy bottom pot that I can make this soup in. So I have a medium to large pot. It's heavy bottom. We're gonna be doing some sauteing at the bottom before, and it has a lid. That's important too. Okay, so this whole recipe is gonna just be made on the stove top. And to get started, we're gonna prep some of our vegetables. What I did say I would talk about other things to add to this dish, and I want to just mention them. We can go into it a little bit more later. If you want to, this dish is often served with tofu and pork as proteins. So I think a nice slow roasted pork belly or pork shoulder would go really well here. But also anything with pork goes super well with the kimchi stew. So maybe you have bacon at home and you might want to cook up some bacon, and instead of cooking your vegetables in the olive oil or the seed oil that came in our kits, you could cook them in a little bit of the bacon fat that's left over. Or you could mix that in or stew your pork ahead of time. If you want any recipes using pork in your kimchi, please go ahead and send us an email. Or Google it yourself, and we'll look it up. The first time I had this recipe was at a Korean restaurant in Hadley, and I fell in love with it. So if you ever have a chance to go out and try this at a restaurant and a very authentic version of it, that would be amazing. And I highly suggest doing it. But for now, this will be delish. Okay. So prepping. We're going to start with about 4 cups of chopped napa cabbage. It's going to be a rough chop. And I always just keep like a cup out around me just to give me a reminder so I don't have to measure everything out just like in my head. And this is going to be 4 like packed cups of the cabbage, so we can use quite a bit of it. When I'm using napa cabbage, I usually remove the outer leaves. Those usually have like more damage on them. They become chicken treats. Maybe just one more. And then I have this beautiful, more contained napa cabbage. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to cut the whole thing in half. So take your time with this because it's quite large. And I'm going to cut it like I would for like a romaine salad. So I've got, I missed a middle. And I'm going to start with the smaller half that I cut just because I'm pretty sure we're going to get close to 6 cups. So here's the root end. We don't really want that. I'm going to start my knife at the edge of the root end. And again, I'm going to cut down the middle. This to me is like the size that I like for my bites of cabbage. So I turn it horizontally. and then I start to make my chops. I'm going to go all the way to where that root end starts. I'm going to use all of it, the yellow part, the white part, the green part. And I'm just cutting around that root end. Okay, that's what I have left. So if you want to go ahead and like take a measurement, you can certainly do that, but I'm looking here and I just, this is like a nice packed 4 cups, and I think what I have is perfect. So if you'd like to clear your cutting board, you can certainly do that, and just by using another bowl and get this stuff off to the side. We're going to keep prepping our vegetables. Next up is going to be garlic, and we're just going to get a tablespoon of minced garlic. Minced it pretty finely. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's going to be cooked, but we don't want huge bites. So let's get ready to do about a tablespoon of garlic, and I've got my napa chopped. I'm going to start off with probably just 3 cloves and see where I'm at. Going to be loud for a sec, just breaking open that garlic so it's easier to peel. I think we need some music in the background sometime on these videos. It'd be really nice to have some tunes playing while people cook. All right. All right, so I'm going to cut those little ends off, although sometimes, I'm not going to lie, I just leave them on the root end. And we're going to get that minced nice and fine. And you can be checking, does this seem like about a tablespoon? It does to me. And I'm going to keep the garlic actually separate from the napa cabbage because it does not go in first. If they were going in at the same time, I just toss them together. But right now I just want to get everything prepped so we're ready to go. Almost everything. All right, so it really doesn't have to be super mincy. I can hold it up on my knife and show you what I've got here. About a tablespoon, and that is good enough for me. That's plenty minced. Okay, and I'm just gonna set that off to the side. You can also leave it on the side of your cutting board if you don't mind doing that. Okay, next up, we're gonna do some ginger. So I just want like about 1 inch of ginger. If you love ginger, go ham, go for it. Have as much as you want. 2 ways to go ahead and peel this is one, using a peeler, of course, and just doing your best to work around the uneven knobs. And after volunteering in a Burmese kitchen for a while, when folks have to do large amounts of ginger, I was taught to use a spoon. And it's pretty easy to get into those crevices with a spoon, a lot easier than a peeler. But it is, you have to put your back into it a little more. So I'm getting that peeled, choosing to use a spoon. It's also, the skin of the ginger, even after being cooked, can be a bit tough. That's why we like to peel it, but it is fine if you leave a little bit on. I should have mentioned this before. If you have a food processor, you're welcome to use that too. Those things are nifty. Okay, and the ginger is also going to get minced. If you still are going to have a lot of ginger left over, I highly suggest candying your ginger, making it a little sweet holiday treat, or making ginger tea, or just using it in any stir fries or sauces. one of my go-to sauces that I like to make is just ginger mixed with soy sauce, little rice vinegar, garlic, sometimes some honey or some kind of sweetener, and kind of cooking that lightly over the stove top, maybe mirin if you have it, not needed though, and making a nice stir fry sauce that's just ready to go anytime I want to make a quick stir fry. You can leave it in the fridge. It's a great use for your ginger. And I'm getting this nice and minced because ginger is definitely a powerful bite. And it doesn't cook down as fast as garlic, so you're still going to feel that burning in the back of your throat if you bite into a big piece. Okay, just getting that all nice and minced. And the ginger actually is going to go in at the same time as the napa cabbage because it does take a little bit to cook. Not as quick to burn. So we can put that into the same bowl where your napa is. Just sprinkle it in there. Lovely. Okay, so our next step in getting everything ready is to drain our kimchi from the brine. And I want 2 packed cups of kimchi. That doesn't include the brine. We're going to use that later, so make sure to preserve your brine. So I'm going to start off with 1 jar. Get everything out of it. You can use a spoon if you need to. I'm guessing this will probably be enough, so you could hold on to your other jar, but we'll see. I also want to point something out that this is a live culture. There's living bacteria in this kimchi, and that's what makes it really good for us. These bacteria are beneficial probiotics. They help us digest food. They're really good for our digestion. So when we cook the kimchi, we're actually, cooking off a lot of those organisms. So having some extra kimchi that you can eat raw is also really good for you. I really, if I'm having stomach troubles, I like to take, a couple bites once a day to help establish good flora in my gut. And you'll see what I'm doing right now. I'm just gently pressing that kimchi, getting any of the excess moisture from that juice out. What's neat about kimchi is you don't actually need to make a brine, a saltwater brine, because when you salt cabbage, so there's so much water in the leaves that they basically make their own brine, and they sweat out that water and they sit. And that's where the fermentation process happens, in a high salt environment that doesn't have much oxygen. All right, so I think that's about 2 cups. I'm gonna go, you can measure yours. I'm gonna go a little bit heavier on mine. I'm probably gonna do 1 1/2, just because I really like kimchi. And I think it's just shy of 2 cups here. So I'm gonna use 1 1/2 container, and I'm keeping all the brine. And I might pour a little brine back into this one, just so that all the contents are submerged. Okay. And giving that a squeeze. Okay. Fabulous. Set that brine aside, except for I'm putting a little more back in my jar. Set the brine aside. We're gonna come back to it. All right. Fabulous. Okay. Now, just timing wise, I decided it'd be a good time to start our rice. This is a really simple rice. It's a 2-to-1 ratio, 2 cups of water, 1 cup of rice. I'm going to put like a half teaspoon of salt in there. And if you'd like to, you can do a little drizzle of sesame oil, really small, like a 1/16 of a teaspoon, just a tiny dash to help flavor that rice. That's totally optional. It's just something I like to do. Then I'm going to measure out 2 cups of water. Pour that into my little rice pot and get that to a boil along with, you know, a half to a quarter teaspoon of salt. Right, and now I'm going to try not to spill rice everywhere by measuring out 1 cup of rice. Oops, I'm using the wrong one. There we go. So rice is something I just don't mess around with. I like to measure it. Anytime I try to wing it, I mess it up. So that's my rice. The other rice advice is get a rice cooker because they tend to do better than I do. Okay, so that's measured out. Make sure that pot for the rice has a lid. I'm going to get it on high heat so it'll start boiling, and then I'm going to add my rice. Okay. Next steps are going to be, we're going to add a little bit of cooking oil to our pot here, our big soup pot, where almost everything's going to be going in here. You have a butternut seed oil you're welcome to use. You can use any kind of oil, olive oil. If you only have canola oil, that's fine. I'm just going to use a little bit of olive oil, and I'm going to use 2 tablespoons of olive oil. Now, if I was doing meat, I would probably use the drippings from that meat if I cooked them first as a way to cook my vegetables. But, you know, if you're not using meat, any kind of oil is great. We're going to get this heated. I'm putting it on medium for now, and I'm going to be careful and watch. I want to make sure we're not burning anything, but our goal now is just to soften the cabbage and the ginger that we're going to put in first. And we're going to measure out 1 teaspoon of sesame and 1 teaspoon of the soy sauce or dumpling sauce, whatever you prefer. I can't do this one because I'm gluten-free and it has gluten. But yeah, so 1 teaspoon of soy, 1 teaspoon of sesame, all of your cabbage and your ginger going in the pot. I'm up to a medium heat. We're going to get those cooking down. We're going to be stirring them. Yeah. So you're welcome to measure out your teaspoons. And later, we're going to be adjusting this recipe for taste. So we'll be looking at if we want it more salty, peppery. You can use soy sauce or salt, but we're not going to mess with that yet because kimchi is pretty salty itself, and I don't want to over salt this dish. So that's going to happen at the very end. All right, I'm just going to use like a wooden spoon of some sort to mix that all up. Make sure everything's coated. Get it cooking. We're going to be doing this part with the lid off. It already smells so good, just with soy and sesame and cabbage and ginger. Okay, that's nice and thorough. Folks, if you haven't done this yet, while you wait for your pot to heat up, you can remove your tofu from the liquid that it's suspended in. You can just drain that liquid. And then sometimes what I like to do when I'm working with tofu is I like to kind of get it dry, not super dry, but I'm going to remove it from the juice, which I already drained, and I'm going to sit it on a paper towel. This is not This is optional, but it's just something I like to do. Okay. And my cabbage is starting to cook. All right, so now I'm going to continuously stir it and cook it for about 3 to 5 minutes until the cabbage starts to break down. Then we're going to be adding in our kimchi, our red pepper flakes, whichever kind you have. If you hate spicy things, you can just leave them out. But I highly suggest using it if you're able. And then some chicken stock. I'm going to get those things ready. So I've got my kimchi, that's up next. My red pepper flakes. And some chicken stock. We're going to be using 2 cups to 2.5 cups. Adjust to your taste. And I'm going to pause at 2 cups. Pretty soon your water should be boiling for your rice, so don't forget about that. And keep stirring. If there's any sticking happening with the napa cabbage or the ginger to the bottom of the pan, you can add some more oil and make sure to continuously stir and or turn your heat down. The noise I want to hear from this is a stir fry noise, which is what I'm hearing, that like sizzling hot when you've got your spoon in there and you're swirling things around. It's a very wonderful sound. All right, so my water's boiling. I'm adding 1 cup of rice. I like to give it a little stir for good luck, and I'm turning the heat way down to as low as it goes. And then I'm going to cover it. So the heat's down, my rice is in, and I'm going to set a timer for 20 minutes, and I'm going to check on it in 20 minutes. Okay, doing great. All right, maybe just another minute on my cabbage while that cooks down. And great. I'm gonna clean off my little teaspoon. It's got some sesame oil. So this recipe calls for 1 to 3 teaspoons of hot pepper. And that's because everybody has a different level of spice that they like to handle. You also don't even have to use, like we said before, you could use like 1/8 of a teaspoon if you're nervous about hot pepper. I'm probably going to use like 1.5 teaspoons. Your kimchi is going to have some hot pepper in it too, so consider that. Take a bite of the kimchi, see what that's like. Are you sensing heat? Not really, not too much. So you might want to use more pepper or less pepper depending on that, but use your intuition. Try your kimchi first. Think about how much pepper you normally like in dishes and adjust based off that. You're probably smelling that wonderful smell of ginger and all of the seasonings, and you might be getting somewhat of like a glazy look, and that's good. It's kind of like sticking to itself, and it's a little bit, it's not liquidy, it's like glazy. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and start adding everything else in. So kimchi, kimchi juice, the broth, and the red pepper. So here comes my broth. 2 cups. And I'm probably going to do a full 2.5, so I'm going to measure out another half. Then lots of kimchi. That was easy. I'm going to put in my garlic. Give that a good stir. And then last but not least, my red pepper. I'm going to do some of my Thai. 1 teaspoon. And I might put in just a dash of the Calabrian, and I inhaled some pepper. Be careful, don't do what I did. Fabulous. Okay, and then I'm gonna give this all a big stir. That's strong stuff. Feels good for my nasal cavities. Okay, so now we're gonna cover, and we're gonna keep the heat at medium here. We're gonna start to see stuff break down a little bit. And we are going to get our tofu and our scallions ready. All right, so my tofu's been sitting for a minute, still has a lot of water. Sometimes I'll do like a little extra squeeze. One tip for tofu, if you're ever making a fried tofu dish, it really works well to freeze the tofu block ahead of time and then thaw it, and then squeeze all that excess water out, and you're gonna have the best fried tofu in the world. This dish, it's not so important. It's a stewed dish. So yeah. Excuse me, I really got pepper at my nose. So we're gonna be making kind of thick slices here. That was something I had in the restaurant. You can do a thick slice like this and keep it the length of the block of tofu if you'd like, and then layer those into the stew, which we'll show you later. You could do a thick slice and then cubes or long thin strips. That really doesn't matter. I kind of like the look of just like these long thin strips. And I'm gonna just hold this up to the camera so you can see about how thick I made it. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and finish that up and be gentle with the tofu. Sometimes it wants to fall apart. Help it keep itself together. Just be gentle. Okay. So these are only gonna take about 5-10 minutes to cook inside of that piping hot stew. Then I'm going to use my same paper towel and get a little more of the moisture now that we've increased the surface area. So again, folks, our stove has almost all of our ingredients in it aside from our tofu and our scallions. And right now we're just getting the tofu cut up. That's going to go in there in the last 5 or so minutes. Our rice is on the stove. It has 13 to, up to 17, depending on how much time you need left. Okay. And now I'm going to slice up some of our green onion. Now the green onion is sort of a garnish, but it's going to go in the last 5 minutes, so it does get cooked. So if you want to save some of those for on top as a garnish, you're more than welcome to. I'm going to use 3 whole scallions for green onions, and I personally like to use every part of it. The top, well, not every part. I don't use the roots, but I do use the tops. I will look for wilty guys like this, and I'll peel that off. Finish that layer. So we really only have the fresh tops. Sometimes I just use my hand and pull, and that's usually where the wilty ones want to come off. Like that. That one looks pretty good. That one's pretty good. Yeah, it's a little trick. And make sure you get any of those if you have like hard pieces, like this one, hard layers, fibrous ones, that is. Get those off. Looks good. We'll start by slicing off the root end. I line them up all together. Discard those, and then we're gonna make pretty thin slices. So those are all the whites, which some of them are dropping on my floor. And I'm gonna go all the way up to the greens because they're beautiful. And they taste good, and there's no reason not to use them. One thing that I really enjoy doing when I get to the green part, move this so you can see a little bit better, is making sort of these longer, thin, angled cuts. And this is what I then use for my garnish. It's just a little fun thing. Definitely don't have to do it. But you get these beautiful ones. So all I'm doing here is I'm holding my knife at an angle and slicing down the scallion leafy green part. So I keep the bottom part, it's going to be for this stew, and the top part will be our garnish. But you can do whatever you want. And make those pretty cuts. All right, and in a second, we're gonna take a peek at the stew, see what's happening, give it a smell. Great, so it's got a nice boil. It's not super hard boiling. And at this point, you can even taste pretty good. Now is a good time to try to decide, if you do give it a little bit of taste, how much more of vinegar or acid do you want to put in this dish? Or maybe you want to add some more chicken stock, depending on how vinegary you like your foods. So I'm going to put in about half of that brine juice. And I'm going to give it a stir. And I'm going to close it back up. So we're keeping it closed because we want to preserve a lot of the liquid that's in there. We have a lot of vegetables taking up a lot of space. So that's important that all of the liquid doesn't evaporate. Okay. Now we're just going to wait a couple more minutes for that stew to develop and kind of mold its flavors. And then we're going to add the scallions, the tofu, boil it for 5 minutes, season with soy sauce or the sweet dumpling sauce. One thing I do recommend, if you use soy sauce like I did instead of the dumpling sauce, you might want to add just a pinch of sugar. And a pinch, I mean, you can actually just pick it up with your hands and pinch it in. I think the sugar really balances the kimchi quite well. So I'm going to do a little bit of that, and then give me a sec. The sweet dumpling sauce, if you use that, does obviously have sugar in it. So I'm going to use a little bit, just a pinch. Help balance out some of those tangy flavors. And if you want to adjust, you can always add more chicken stock, more soy sauce, pepper, or more salt. Okay. So I think this could go another few minutes, but I don't think it hurts to go ahead and add your tofu if you're ready, if 15 minutes have come up. Just want to keep checking on it. This should go about 15 minutes till we add the tofu. Right. And maybe take this time to clean up your workstation. I'm going to mute you while I do that. We're still here, Kyle, just getting a little bit cleaned up while this finishes its 15 minutes before we do the next step. All right, so I've got a nice good boil going here. Some medium. And give it a stir. Now I'm going to lower the heat a little bit. And I'm going to add my scallions and my tofu. And I'm going to try to press the tofu just under the brine or the broth. All right, get my scallions in, saving some for a garnish. Put down. Then we'll go with the tofu. So I wish I could bring you over there, but I'm just, right now, I'm not worried about where it's going. I'm just setting it on top, and then I'm going to use my wooden spoon to push it down under the broth. Right, just gently pushing it down so that the tofu can be submerged, get fully cooked. So I'm seeing it's simmering right now. There's bubbles happening. There's resistance when I push the tofu down. That's good. We're going to leave it like that for about 5 minutes while those cook through. Then we can adjust salt, or soy sauce. I'm going to put some pepper on now because I know I'm going to want some black pepper. Do about, you know, 1/16 of a teaspoon, or just everybody knows how much pepper they like. It's going to be a nice and spicy dish. Now remember, these flavors are intense, just like previous workshops we've had. Kimchi is a very vinegary flavor. And this dish, the reason why it works so well with all that vinegar is we serve it over a very bland rice. So when we serve this up, I'm going to put mine in a nice big bowl with this heaping scoop of rice in the middle and the kimchi stew on top. Another thing is I made some bacon earlier. So I'm going to use some of that bacon, crumble it up on top. There's a little bit of pork flavor that would be really good too. Just checking to make sure all of our pieces are submerged. Wonderful. Here it is. This will just be another couple minutes cooking that tofu. Don't forget to try to go on our YouTube channel and check out how you can use leftovers to make some kimchi of your own. There's a million recipes out there in the world. You just have to find your favorite. And notice at this point, I've left the top open. So we are getting rid of some of that extra broth now. We're simmering it open. Okay, so it looks like our rice is done. I'm just going to test that. Yeah. Nice and fluffy white rice. So to plate it, you're just going to put a nice big scoop in the middle of your bowl. And once you've been cooking your tofu for about 5 minutes, you should be good to go. And I think that's all we have for you today, folks. Please let us know how you like the kimchi stew. If you could please help us out by suggesting recipes or things that you'd like to learn. We'd love to get your feedback. There are forms that you can fill out that will be sent to you if you registered for the class, or you can just send us an email and that would be lovely. Okay, Kyle, I think we're good on recording.